and I'm the Curator of Academic Programs here at the Loeb Center. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. If you're coming from outside Vassar, then I'd like to welcome you to the campus and college as well. And I want to extend a third and very warm welcome to our speakers, Christy Van Horn, Kiana Tipton, and Aisha Becker-Burrowes. Our program tonight, Digital Platforms for Reproductive Justice, has been organized in conjunction with the Loeb's special exhibition, Reproductive, Health, Fertility, Agency, which you saw as you walked in to your left. The exhibition was originally curated and shown at the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago in 2021, which is also the last full year that Roe versus Wade was still in effect, right? The artists in the show focus on the psychological, physical, and emotional realities and the historical challenges to access to healthcare that women and people assigned female at birth experience around fertility. The work also focuses on the history of gynecology and the racial violence that undergirds the formation of the profession. And ultimately, it focuses on the question of reproductive justice, which is not just a national issue, but it's a global issue, right? So the show has been brought here to the Loeb by a talented team led by our Curator of Photography, Jessica Breyer, who, in an interesting but perhaps fitting twist of events, is not here today because she is on maternity leave. And then for this event tonight, I also want to thank Vassar's STS Science, Technology, and Society program. It's been a real pleasure to work with my co-organizer, Christy Van Horn, who teaches in STS, and you'll hear from her in just a second. Christy will also more properly introduce our speakers. And I want to thank Jose Perian, the director of STS, for co-sponsoring this event. So we really like to think about how the museum's exhibitions and collections and programming can engage the campus, can engage academic thinking and learning. And so this is a really interesting opportunity for us. Just one housekeeping thing. So you've probably seen the flyers in your chairs. They have QR codes. At the end, we do a Q&A section. We'll do it in two ways. You can raise your hands and you can ask a question directly. Or if you'd like to type a question into a form, I'll receive the question and I can read it out for you. And the form is anonymous. And I'll now turn it over to you, Jose, to say a few words about STS and to introduce Christy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jose Perian, and I am the director of the STS program here. We are actually celebrating, this year is our celebration of 50 years at Vassar, STS program's 50th anniversary. It's one of the first multidisciplinary programs. For those of you not from Vassar or not part of the community, I'll just say that the multidisciplinary programs are not quite formal departments, but they're spaces and places on campus where faculty from various disciplines come and engage each other and teach students, but from their perspectives. And so they're really rich environments. Very happy and honored to be a part of the STS program. And as you can imagine, the STS program itself thinks about science, the intersections of science, technology, and society. And we're so excited to partner with you in this program, so thank you for doing that. Let me quickly introduce Christy, and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can take it. It's a privilege to introduce Christy Van Horn. Christy has over 20 years of experience in public health and is the founder and president of CDH Consulting. She supports training and educational initiatives for renowned organizations such as Planned Parenthood, the CDC, and international bodies such as the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. In 2023, Christy received the Athena Award for Excellence in Leadership, Community Service, and Mentorship of Women. A dedicated advocate for reproductive health and abortion rights, she has advanced these causes through professional roles and grassroots activism. Christy formerly served as vice chair of the National Women's Health Network, co-hosted a podcast on menstruation, and has engaged with leaders at all levels of government for over a decade to advocate for reproductive rights and justice. Over the past several years, we have been fortunate in STS to have Christy as an adjunct professor and an invaluable contributor to our program here at Vassar. So thank you, Christy. Thank you for everything you've done, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. Okay. Well, I recently started wearing readers, so bear with me, and I didn't make my font large enough. You'd think I would learn. So I want to also start, I don't need these right now, just by thanking the Loeb for partnering with us, for Jose agreeing to support this initiative, and everyone being here tonight. Thank you for coming. I know that you will leave inspired, educated, and learning more about the state of reproductive health in our country right now, and ways, and creative ways, I need to say, of how we are overcoming these barriers to care. I am so excited to introduce you to these two incredible women sitting next to me. They have a lot in common, so I'm gonna start with their similarities. Both Kiana and Aisha are originally from Seattle. Now they live in New York. I feel like that is a win for the East Coast. We did it. They are both creatives, they are both advocates, they are both reproductive justice warriors with interests in technology and media. Both are also storytellers and really use storytelling to amplify people's voices. Kiana is the digital director of Charley. We're going to learn a lot more about Charley. Charley is an abortion chatbot designed to protect user privacy and simplify the abortion seeker journey in America. Just yesterday, Kiana and a team launched a new initiative and website called Abortion in America that lifts up abortion stories from every state in our country. Aisha and I were lucky enough to be at the launch of this event, and I can't recommend checking out this website and this initiative highly enough. It's very simple, abortioninamerica.org. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as the evening goes on. Kiana has also worked for Radical Girl Gang, Teach for America, Essence. She believes that tech, when designed with intention, can dismantle inequity. I also want to mention that Kiana was a virtual guest speaker in my women's health course last semester. One of my students in that class was an STS graduating senior, and she said to me that the connections between science, technology, and society have never been clearer to her than after she heard Kiana speak. So it's very appropriate that she is with us tonight. Aisha Becker-Burrowes is a social entrepreneur who works at the intersection of media, communication, and social change with an emphasis on racial equity and gender justice. She founded Studio Watts, a social impact agency and creative collective made up of radical communicators, mission-driven storytellers, and purpose-fueled creatives of color. Aisha works with companies including Netflix, Essence Magazine, Viacom CBS, and she is also the co-director of FEMINIST, the largest woman-owned social digital platform with a global audience of over 6 million people. So, sitting next to two incredible human beings. Let's start. I would like to actually start with both of you, and Kiana, we can start with you, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you into the spaces that you work in today.
Yeah, so although I'm originally from Seattle, I spent my entire 20s in Texas, which is not a great place to be a pregnant person right now. But back up a little bit. This is kind of a fun story. I'll keep it short. I think when I was in high school, Barack Obama was the first president that I could ever vote for. I was very excited about it. I was 18. I was bawling when he was president. I was so happy. I read his book, and I was like finding all these similarities between me and Barack, which I'd never really seen before. And he was a community organizer in Chicago. So I was 18, I was like, I guess I have to be a community organizer. And so I looked up like how to be a community organizer in Seattle, and ended up joining this nonprofit called Washington Community Action Network. And I was basically one of those canvassers going door to door. And the projects we were working on were universal health care, which has not happened, and raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour in Seattle, which did happen. And I think I was radicalized very young when I was 18 in that organization, but I very quickly, I think, learned the power of speaking to people individually, coming to their door, the things that you can say to kind of get them to lock in on you. And then I also kind of saw this huge missed opportunity with this organization to activate people digitally. Everything we did was on the ground. All of our canvassing was very in person. And as I went to school and studied and did some other things, I just continued to be really curious about how to make an impact in a larger way. Because I was, at one point I had torn my ACL. I was going to door with a big brace, which I actually think served me because people felt bad for me. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you some money. But I think that really sparked this curiosity in me, and how can we continue to make impact in this world that's becoming more and more digital, and also in this world where if the digital tools that are being created aren't being created by the people who they actually serve, could this actually add to inequity instead of dismantling it? So I've kind of followed that curiosity, and it's taken me all over the place. But I'll talk a little bit more about how that led to Charley and some of the other things I'm working on as well.
I think kind of similar, right? I was radicalized very early. If anything, perhaps maybe like a little bit since birth, basically. Both of my parents are musicians, music educators, and also my dad was a Rasta. I was born biracial, so, you know, black and white. My dad's Afro-Guyanese. And they always really used, like, they understood the limits of my education, right? Like, as a black woman in America. And so consistently sort of used, like, music and media as, like, a method to kind of teach, right? And so I remember, like, the first time ever learning about the transatlantic slave trade was my parents going line by line, helping me understand the history of it through a really kind of empathetic way, right? Of listening to Bob Marley's Redemption Song, right? Which is, like, all about that, basically. And so the music and, like, stories that my parents really kind of, like, fed me helped me understand that, like, media can really be a vehicle for social change. And so media and music, and so that always kind of became my North Star. From a very early age, I thought I wanted to be like a documentary producer. Like, I didn't quite know how it would all work out, but I knew that being at this intersection of, like, media and social change would be absolutely my method of, like, creating change, educating people, driving awareness around really key issues. And that's been true pretty much the entirety of my career. Yeah.
Incredible, thank you. I want to ask, before we dive into more of the technical pieces of your work, you had a chance to see the exhibit tonight. Was there anything that stood out to you or anything that you want to share that struck you?
Yeah, I think to start, the event that we had last night for the launch of Abortion in America, there were 4 storytellers from different banned and restricted states, one from Florida, one from Texas, and then 2 from Louisiana. And I was thinking a lot about how I've engaged with these videos and these stories before. I've written stories about them, I've read the stories, I've watched the videos that we produced, but to be sitting in that room with them while they're sharing their stories, you really have to sit with it differently and engage with it differently. And going through this museum and exhibit, I obviously looked it up online before, I did my research, but to go through and read it and watch it in this type of setting, again, it's heavy because you have to sit with it. And it's such a different experience than when you're scrolling or when, you know, when something pops up and you're like, oh, I'll come back to this later, or I don't have the capacity to deal with this right now. And so I think what really struck me about this exhibit is how the stories came through and it felt heavy. And I kind of think it should feel heavy. Like, sometimes I think we become numb to some of the things that are going on. And I actually think it's very good to feel the heaviness, to feel the grief, to feel the loss. And I felt that while walking through the exhibit. And I don't know if this is twisted, but I like to feel the grief sometimes because it reminds me that, like, okay, like, you haven't become numb to this. You're in this work and it's heavy, but you're not numb to it. You're still feeling that grief. And so that's, I was most struck by that.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, there wasn't a dry eye in the room last night.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I saw this exhibit, I was surrounded. It was the opening night and there were a lot of people here, and I didn't feel like I could actually experience it the way I wanted to. And I came back, and after a meeting with Ezra last week, experienced it myself. And there's power in that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Aisha.
I think similar, right? Like, I think it felt very heavy, but also in a really visceral way, right? And I think that that's like the power of art. I think I've been I think I actually have become a little bit numb, right? Because I've been like really deep in this space, especially since Roe fell, right? And just hearing really heavy stories that I think there's a sense of like desensitization that I have to do in order to like continue this work. But I think being able to like sit here in a kind of a slow setting and really just like feel art. There's like other feelings that came up beyond just heaviness, right? Like my skin was crawling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my chest felt heavy. Like there was a kind of embodied sense that I felt that I think only art can do in particular. And I think I also loved, I think intersectionality is not quite the right word, but I loved that it was more than just like reproduction and like reproductive care. I think it was like seeing, you know, the non-binary couple that was really excited about having a baby, right? Seeing someone talk about the experience of menopause, right? And just like really connecting sort of reproductive justice in a way that's like really expansive, I think was also powerful, and I think needs to be done more, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Love that. It's not just the reproductive years of our lives. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's jump into the really interesting stuff. Aisha, like, how did feminist come to be? Like, did you just wake up one day and have 6 million followers? Like, what happened?
I think so many things happened. Like, so in 2020, we basically like formulated the company behind Feminist, and at that point, it grew from like 1 million to 6 million, right? Now, the statistic is actually that at that time, folks were scrolling on their phone like the length of the Eiffel Tower, right? Which is wild. Our thumbs were putting in work in 2020.
I've never heard that.
But I think it was like, you know, time of like racial uprisings and a Trump presidency, and folks were like looking for different ways to engage online, right? And so we were talking about everything from like period poops and how you get them more when you're on your period, and, you know, abortion, and really just like kind of running the gamut. I always say kind of like hacking the algorithm a little bit. So like beyond just kind of influencers and lifestyle, whatever, here's this lipstick you need to buy, like really interjecting it with like really intersectional feminist issues. And yeah, that was kind of our like genesis story. I always say, like, me and my co-founders kind of sat and were like, okay, if Ms. Magazine was to like be founded today, where would it live, right?
Love that.
And we were like online and on social media, which like as a traditional media girly, like I know sometimes makes me want to like vomit sometimes, but it's true. And so much so that we had this like incredible opportunity to like have dinner with Gloria Steinem, and we sort of were like, okay, Gloria, Gloria Steinem, we have this like genesis story, and we think that if Ms. Magazine were like founded today, it would be online and on social media. And she sort of paused and she's like, yeah, it would. So that was really affirming. Yeah,
That's all.
kind of our
Great.
yeah.
Thank you. And Charley? What about Charley?
Yeah, so Charley is an anonymous abortion chatbot. It was created post-Roe by Cecile Richards and Tom Subak, our co-founders, formerly Planned Parenthood powerhouses. And it was really created after a lot of research about what has changed about the abortion seeker's search journey online. So before Roe fell, the things that abortion seekers were looking for online, how much does an abortion cost? Where is like my nearest clinic? You know, the standard questions. After Roe fell, they're asking, is abortion legal? Where can I get an abortion? Will I get in trouble? The questions changed. What people are worried about changed. So the tools that we need to create to now meet abortion seekers where they are need to change. And I think specifically when we're thinking about tech products and you're thinking about the abortion seeker, the trigger bans go into effect in Texas, Louisiana. The abortion seekers in Texas, Louisiana, these states with bans, look different and have different needs than an abortion seeker in New York. If I want to go to get an abortion and I live in New York now, one, I'm in the movement, so I know exactly where to go. I know what to do. If I don't want to leave my house, I can go to Aid Access. I can order pills for pretty cheap. If I'm in Texas, completely different experience. The reality of most abortion seekers in America before Roe and also after, mostly Black women, Indigenous women, Latinx, or pregnant people, and mothers, low income. So when you're looking at this specific demographic, there are no tools created to specifically meet this demographic where they're at when looking for abortion information online. And when you do go online, there's a lot of censorship and there's a lot of misinformation. So we did all of this research that was basically when you are in Texas and you're looking for abortion information, almost all of what you receive is telling you that you have to go out of the state. It's driving you to very specific clinics that might not even be your closest clinic. And the prices are like $500, $600, $700. So think of being an abortion seeker in Texas. You might be a mother. You might not have childcare help. Maybe you've never even left the state before. And the information online is telling you, you must leave the state, find childcare, and come up with $600, $700. That's not possible. And when you go online in these states, that is like the number one thing that comes up. The reality is you can receive abortion pills by mail in any state, including Texas, including Louisiana, including in Florida. And so Charley was really created to cut through the noise, the 24/7 news cycle. It can be embedded on any website. And very quickly tell the abortion seeker what all of their options are and kind of guide them along the way. And so it really it started after doing the research and seeing what the gap and what the need was. And I think it really aligns with this core belief that I have that I always say I'm cautiously optimistic that tech can be used for good. I think a lot of tech can be created with a good intention, and then intentions don't always matter. Sometimes it didn't work out. But we've been very, very intentional and specific about who we are trying to reach. And this isn't a tool that was created for every abortion seeker. Although any abortion seeker could use it, it was specifically created for pregnant people in banned and restricted states that have less access, less money, all of those things. And I think when building tech tools that are made for impact, you have to be specific about who you're building them for.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a couple of follow-up questions. So how does Charley remain anonymous? And I've also heard an interview with you, that emphasized that this is also not AI.
Yes.
And you like to make sure that people understand that it's not AI.
And I'm not, I'll say this, don't hate me, but I don't hate AI. I think we need to be careful with it. And I feel like I don't hate it because I know it's coming. So I'm learning.
It's here.
It's here,
Yeah.
It's coming. I've got to learn as much as we can
Yeah.
about it. We can't really say no to it because then people like Elon, no shade to him, no, shade to him, shade to him, are going to be the ones creating the tools that serve everybody. And I don't want, ideally, that doesn't happen. But Charley in its current form does not use AI. It uses something called branch logic, which means all information within the bot has been pre-vetted, written by our team, reviewed by medical experts, and so forth, advocates, and that there are different pathways that you can go down based on using the chatbot. So, AI could scour the internet or different sources that are put within that AI system to populate an answer for you. That doesn't happen in Charley. We have hundreds of different pathways, and we have written answers for every single different pathway that could come up already. So that is the difference. It uses branch logic. From a privacy perspective, Charley does not use any cookies or pixels, so there is no tracking that happens within the bot. And we only work with back-end systems that agree with all of our privacy policies. And fun fact is we actually couldn't find any in America, so our servers are in a different country. The standard of privacy is higher than you can get anywhere in America.
Incredible. Thank you. Aisha, when we spoke last week in preparation for this, we talked about censorship and talking about censorship, and you used a term and added another book to my list called The Algorithms of Oppression. And could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
So I don't have to buy the book.
Yeah. I can try. I read it. I also kind of went to a similar program as
STS.
STS.
Yeah.
I went to media culture and communications at NYU, so very much kind of like lived and breathed this like similar language. So it was a while ago, so I don't know if I can give you the full summary, but essentially it's an author, Sophia Noble, who wrote this book, Algorithms of Oppression, which I think kind of at this time when the internet was first created, people were like optimistic about it being like a raceless place, being like a space for good, and really what Sophia Noble basically argues is that like the algorithms will have bias inevitably based on who is creating them, which in the case of most algorithms are cis white men, and so in that oppression is sort of built into the algorithms. And I think when it comes to feminist and sort of like abortion storytelling and everything that we're seeing, like that is ripe and real. I think, there's kind of like you're saying, cautiously optimistic about tech for good, right? Like I definitely feel that way. I think that we're seeing censorship. Our account was down for like a week because Meta just decided we were talking about abortion too much. If you type the word abortion, it won't get fed to outside followers. There'll be like engagement issues. I remember kind of the first time really realizing the impact of this was when we did a large awareness campaign on missing, murdered, and Indigenous women, and it was completely shadow banned. And there was a bunch of influencers, activists, like other organizations that all really like participated with us in this. And there's an impact to that, right? Like you can't. Where then the whole goal is to raise awareness, right? Yeah. And we are limited in that. I think we definitely go back and forth with this.
We tried to get at Afrotech to talk about the censorship of Google and abortion, and they didn't allow us in.
Yeah.
So working on it.
I don't know. I mean, I think like in terms of like other folks that are doing advocacy work online. They're misspelling abortion on purpose, right? They are, I was also just on a call about this today, but folks are seeing more success by not spelling or typing anything out, but by basically saying what they're wanting to say by holding like text up, because it's harder to sort of be read in the algorithm. So there's a lot of things that folks are doing to like hack the oppressive algorithm, right? We're seeing it with election, like all types of things, right? But especially with abortion right now, and it's a problem. Yeah.
And then I was gonna jump in on like a deeper level. So I think we're seeing censorship from tech companies, 100%. We're seeing it, and it's difficult and it's impactful. But something that I like to share in these rooms too is that we're actually seeing a lot of censorship within the movement as well. So like I said, there is a reason why most people in Texas, Louisiana, Florida do not know that you can order abortion pills by mail. And that is because a lot of the bigger groups in Repro are not sharing this information. And it has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with capitalism, their business plan. It is stressful to be an abortion clinic in America, even in a state with access. However, this censorship and this inability to fully align on a message within the Repro movement as a unit has been deeply harmful to people that need care most. And so I think we're seeing this censorship at a bigger level that everyone is being affected by and is hurting all of the Repro orgs. And then we're also seeing this kind of deeper level of censorship of people being nervous about legality and all of these other things to share what honestly like the cheapest and sometimes most accessible option for most people in these banned and restricted states are, which is abortion pills by mail. And it can be difficult to fight these battles within the movement because we know everyone is, doing their best. But what we really need is this deeper alignment and this coalition building and being really unified around one message. And I think that's something that the Repro movement isn't talking about enough, is some of the censorship that's happening actually within our movement and how, in a lot of ways, like we failed when Roe fell, like the reproductive movement failed. I think we need to talk about that.
Deeply life-changing opportunity to sort of hear from, go to Florida, which has a 12-week abortion ban, and it is absolutely on the ballot right now. It is also the one few places left in the South where folks can travel to get an abortion, because there's so many 6-week abortion bans beyond that. So it's a really critical state, right, for abortion access right now, and it's under threat. But folks are fighting. Just know that.
Yes. Well, DeSantis is also fighting.
Yes.
He's trying to keep, people from hearing the information, and it's blatantly.
Yeah.
So it's scary.
Yeah. But to this point of censorship, went to a Planned Parenthood clinic, heard from a bunch of, abortion activists, abortion storytellers, abortion providers, went to a crisis pregnancy center, which for those that don't know, it's basically like a fake clinic meant to intentionally mislead folks into not getting an abortion and getting the care that they need. But anyway, meeting with a lot of the providers was probably the most impactful because a lot of them were saying how their hands are just really tied right now. And so, I think it comes from this idea of censorship, right? And how the laws are quite literally being built to tie the hands of a lot of providers who are now not only having to figure out how to navigate the legal system to provide the care that they want, but are also quite literally have lawyers on speed dial to assess whether or not they can give someone the care that they need.
Perfect segue into talking about storytelling specifically. We know the power of storytelling. We experienced it last night. But also, I think, we were sharing space with people. Last night we're sharing space right now. How do you bring those stories to and through digital means in such an impactful way? Because it's not easy. But yeah.
I can start.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I think it's, I think two things that I think about this. One, I think media really just has the power to really shift public consciousness.
Yeah.
That's why I've been very, that's why to me it's been such a crucial method for my work. And I think I also have a long legacy in traditional media. So kind of starting in publishing, I was in the music industry, traditional publishing magazines, and then broadcast television, and then streaming and tech, and then eventually moving over to social media. So I think the way that I think about storytelling is kind of vast within that, and I think when it comes to abortion stories, and why I think social media is so ripe with opportunity is because not only does it sort of like decentralize or democratize media, right? Like not everyone can call up CNN to share their abortion story, but you can take to your phone and post on social media and like share your story. And so there's like a democratization, but also destigmatization that then comes from that, right? So if we all know, or not everyone may know this, but the saying like someone you know and someone you love has had an abortion, right? And that comes from the fact that one in 4 women in the U.S. will have experienced an abortion in their lifetime. Those same 1 in 4 women have the opportunity to take to their social media, take to their phone, share their story. And I think that that's incredibly powerful. And those 3 of the, of the one that loved someone that's had an abortion are also taking their phones, right?
Yeah.
And there's also, it's sort of the destigmatization also helps like trans people say, hey, look at me, I've had an abortion too. And so there's an ability to like share more robust stories around abortion storytelling. But abortion.
I actually have a quick follow-up question before.
Yeah.
So we are in abortion mindset. The 3 of us have admitted that this week has been a lot, right? I want to acknowledge that feminists addresses so many other issues. And props to you for doing that. Like you include a lot of global perspectives as well. So how do you manage all of the volume, and how do you also center global initiatives?
Yeah. It's a big question.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's just like, I think the 4 things that we said are kind of like our mission is to be intersectional, to be international, to be intentional, and to be intergenerational, right? And so I think like that is seen across everything that we do, and that intersectionality and that international piece is really key. Our audience is actually like 60% global, and so there's like a requirement to be really global in this work, right? And when it comes to like reproductive justice, like this is not just happening in the U.S., right? We saw this in the exhibit, right? But like Poland has had this for years, right? There's an incredible movement, the Green Wave movement coming out of Latin America. Like folks have really been doing this work for a really long time. And so in some ways it's quite easy to be international and to be able to think global. I think where it gets hard is obviously like most of our team is in the US. And so we actually have like direct lines of communications with a lot of activists, a lot of organizers, a lot of organizations, which I think was like really central to us being able to like do this work and tell these stories. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answered the
It
question,
did.
but
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Kiana, storytelling. And I don't know if you want to talk about Charley or the new project that you've been working on.
I think Abortion in America is a storytelling project, so I'll ground my response in that, but also to kind of carry on some of what Aisha was speaking to. I really think of even digital storytelling as a part of an ecosystem of storytelling, because it can't exist without gossip. It can't exist without, telling stories to your friend and through text, or I guess that's still kind of digital, or meeting up with a friend to share. Before someone ever shares an abortion story online, they've probably shared it with someone in person first. And so I think digital storytelling, activism, everything digital is an ecosystem that helps support storytelling in all of these other ways. And so I really think Abortion in America was grounded in that. Cecile Richards and Lauren Peterson went around the country, mainly Florida and Louisiana, for about a year, talking to people, talking to doctors in Louisiana after the trigger ban went into place, doctors that were terrified to tell their patients almost anything. Yeah. Doctors that there were patients and doctors saying that they wouldn't even see a patient until 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. Like you would know you were pregnant and you had to just not go to a doctor if you lived in Louisiana, because doctors were so scared about miscarriages happening within that time. So just imagine being pregnant, wanted pregnancy or not wanted pregnancy, and your doctor refusing to see you until you hit a certain place. That's the reality of what is happening in states like Louisiana and Texas and Florida and all across the South. And those stories aren't getting shared. And a lot of this work happened in person and on the ground first. But obviously not everybody here is going to have the opportunity to go to Louisiana, go to Florida, to talk to some of these doctors, to talk to patients, pregnant people in these states. So that's where it is an ecosystem. We need to have these advocates and these people, and we need Caitlin Joshua, she's from Louisiana. She's shared her story on a pretty national stage now, and she had deep roots in Louisiana and in Baton Rouge, and spoke with people for weeks and months and built these relationships in order to help them and encourage them to share their stories as well. And that's not something that can just happen digitally. It all has to be interconnected. So while Abortion in America is a project that lives online and tell these stories through video format, and will share these stories through digital formats as well, so much of the work and the ecosystem is also on the ground. And it's learning, and I'm still learning and still sitting with it. And digital will continue to change every single day for as long as I'm in this, which is fun, but also challenging, is really figuring out how to continue to honor those experiences that are happening on the ground, but bring them to more people, because I deeply, deeply believe, and I think we both believe this, that storytelling does have, and there's actually recent research that says this specifically about abortion too, that storytelling has the power to change the hearts and minds of people's perceptions, specifically when it comes to abortion. That someone who might be on the line hears a story about someone in a state with an abortion ban, a personal story, and they now feel like they understand the impact of these abortion bans better and will vote differently. That is real recent research that has been published and happening. And so I think when done right, storytelling as an ecosystem on the ground and digitally can be really powerful, especially hopefully before this election.
Yes, we'll come back to the election.
Yeah, no.
I also just want to acknowledge how brave these people are as well. Providers, like patients, everyone. It takes such strength to share in the environment we're living in right now. So a couple more questions, and then we will open it up for Q&A. I want to talk just for a moment about misinformation. Misinformation about everything right now, even Prop 1, which I'll mention in a minute, but you can't, how do you manage it? I mean, there's misinformation everywhere, but you're managing digital platforms. Like, how do you combat that? We'll start with you, Aisha.
I'm not entirely sure. I think leaning really heavily on experts, right? Leaning really heavily on like those organizational partners that I said that we have a super tiny team, right? And so we couldn't do this like without the work and like deep relationship with folks like Kiana that I can sort of text up and be like, hey, is this accurate, right? And so, but I think that intentionality really matters when it comes to, especially when it comes to abortion storytelling. And care in particular. But I think to kind of also pull back and talk about like the larger landscape a little bit, like I think that misinformation is like a really intentional strategy, right? And the right is investing very heavily in this as a strategy for themselves. I think, we saw it on the debate stage with Trump talking about, at 9 months you can abort a baby. That's just like inaccurate.
Yeah, I think it even goes a step further. It's disinformation. It's disinformation. Yeah.
Or J.D. Vance, who, on his debate stage was like, wait, I thought we weren't fact-checking, right? And it's because they're pulling from they know that most folks aren't sitting to watch the full debate, right? And so these sound bites are what get sort of chopped up and shared on social media, and that misinformation, disinformation is like a huge strategy and piece of that. So I think that, we also think a lot about how I think there's so many people that kind of sensationalize these like Trump sound bites or whatever. And we often do not repost or reshare or any of that on purpose, because we don't even want someone to get lost in the first 2 to 3 seconds of like whatever nonsense is being shared. And that's like a very intentional strategy that I think not.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Because I mean, we're all on social media, right? So what if somebody posts something that's incorrect? Like, do you respond to that? How do you manage that?
So we try not to comment. We try to let our community like educate themselves, because they're actually like really good at that.
Yeah.
Especially the clapback. Like the clapback is incredible. I think there are definitely times when we have to come in and maybe change the caption or add like a little note to combat that. But oftentimes, again, I think with like an audience of 6 million, like folks are just very active in the comments, and will often kind of educate each other, which I think is really, really key.
I have two thoughts that came up while you were speaking.
Yeah.
One is, so I did a lot of research. I think we both had kind of similar research in like grad school and things, but a lot of research on how tech was created and how, and later the impact of that same tech. And so I'm thinking about when Facebook first rolled out emoji reactions. There's all of this research that basically shows they rolled that out to like kind of be playful and to add more engagement and all of these things. The impact of that was sound bites and insane headlines. In a way that now when things are published, they are published specifically so that headline gets attention. It gets shared more because an algorithm was created that a heart or an anger emoji or a share is more weighted than some other types of engagement, like reading the article. Can you imagine that? So when thinking about these things, like tech is created, and sometimes these unintentional things happen, and then they just kind of allowed it to happen. It just kept going. And so when thinking about the people creating tech, you have to be so intentional about what it could do and also who it is for. And so that's kind of the first thing I was thinking about, like the soundbite culture and all of that happened. I don't want to put it all on Facebook, Meta, whatever, but it did happen because we were not as thoughtful as we should have been about algorithmic changes and what could happen. So that's the first thing I want to bring up. The second thing is Charley and how it can fight misinformation is specifically how the tech is set up. So Charley is connected to an API database of 2 different things. One, all of the abortion laws in America. And that database is updated every single day. So if a new law went into effect in Louisiana tomorrow, Charley would be updated. So every time that you are using Charley, you can know that this information is up to date and factual. The second database that it's a part of is I Need an A's database that manually calls and checks and also digitally does this clinics throughout America to make sure the times, their services, all of those things are up to date and accurate. So again, every time that you use Charley, all of the laws are up to date, the clinic information is up to date, where you can access pill information. It's all technologically updated and safe, which I think has been really helpful because Charley is a tool that can be embedded on different pages. So for nonprofits or different places that don't have the time and capacity to keep up with all of the changes, but maybe they created a resource post-row or whatever, we're actually embedded on Feminist's resource page. But you can chat with Charley, and every day you know that you're getting access to the most up-to-date abortion information because of the databases it's connected to. And so that's a way to fight misinformation really through tech.
Also, just to add to that, like I think it literally is the solution for misinformation, right?
Yeah.
In like a very technical way. So just want to shout that out.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. One last point before we talk about the election and then open it up. I wanted to just talk about access, right? We talk about abortion and the demographics and the people that need abortions most in the most restricted states. And chances are, or possibly, they don't have access to tech. What are our thoughts on that? And yeah, let's just, I'll just ask a very vague question.
We
Aisha,
talked
do you want
about
to
this a
start?
little bit in the car. Do you want to
No.
start or- Okay. Yeah, we talked about this in the car on the way there because we're both such, cautiously optimistic about tech. But that is the reality of, many parts of this country, and also many people that need access to healthcare and abortion are in places where it is most difficult to access digital information online, which is where a lot of this up-to-date information is. But again, I think so much of our work, it's grounded in the green movement. It's grounded in people that are on the ground doing this work. Storytelling, again, I don't think it happens without gossip. It doesn't happen without, there's so many people that I've talked to, students, patients, doctors, whoever, where before they go online, they ask somebody. And so I was talking with these Planned Parenthood Generation Action students in Florida, and she was telling me about when she got her abortion, she asked her friend where she got her abortion. And she said, oh, I went here, but be careful because there's a clinic across from the Planned Parenthood that's kind of disguised as a Planned Parenthood, but it's a CPC, a crisis pregnancy center, so don't go to that one. And in fact, let me go with you. So I think those moments still are important and they still need to happen, but there's absolutely a gap in access and care. But there's also so many great organizations on the ground like Los Libres that are sending abortion pills by mail. And they have this whole underground network of people sending these pills. Like, no matter what happens post-election and no matter what happens, if the fall of society happens and we don't have phones, we don't have whatever, there are going to be people that are still fighting to get people the information they need. And so I think, again, if we are even thinking about tech, or if we're thinking, we do really have to be thinking about the people with the less access and building tools that are most helpful to them. And if we're not doing that, then we're failing.
Yeah, and I think just like beyond that too, I think there's a lot of harm. I know we're talking about the good piece of it, right? And I know we kind of hinted at the not so optimistic feelings around media and tech, and I think that this question absolutely, like, the digital divide is real. Not everyone has access, right? And that means that not everyone is able to receive the information in the same ways that we are like heavily investing in right now.
Yeah.
But also, like, in a lot of ways, I talked about the censorship, but like it's not always safe. Like, if you're trying to help a friend in a like a restricted state try to get care for an abortion, it's better not to text. They're like legally going after people for this as a form of aiding and abetting. And so folks are turning to platforms like Signal, right, that's more encrypted. So just to add some added context to that, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of activists and organizers that are doing the, passing out pamphlets, throughout Brazil or whatever it is, to sort of like help with that, the digital divide.
No, thank you. And I think it's useful in discussions like this on a college campus where so many students aren't from here, and taking that, information home with them. So
download Signal.
Right? Yes.
And be annoying at dinner parties. Talk about abortions.
Yes.
Tell people abortion pills by mail are available in every state.
Yes.
I'm so fun at dinner parties.
Always. My husband's here. He's like, yeah.
That Project 2025.
Yeah. I know how fun she is. Last but not least, it's so close. So the election, Prop 1, I want to just mention that I just want to mention what it is before we talk about all the misinformation that's out there, but also I want to hear from you. But Prop 1 would add new constitutional protections to the state's constitution's Equal Protection Clause, prohibiting discrimination based on ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, and sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy, pregnancy outcomes, reproductive health, care, and autonomy. it will, I feel like some of it was deleted, but we need to pass Prop 1, and there is so much misinformation out there. I'm even seeing yard signs with misinformation, which is just mind-boggling to me. But I did leave the statistic in here that says that as of just Tuesday, 70% of voters surveyed in New York State said that they were going to vote yes, and that is incredible. So with the election less than 2 weeks away, obviously we're all feeling anxious. I won't ask how anyone is feeling. But any last words of wisdom or messages of hope, or just any feelings we're having on the eve of?
I'll start. This isn't, well, I don't know if this is hopeful. We'll figure it out after I say it. But I will say that the work that we do with Charley and Abortion America, and with some of our core partners, I Need an A, M&A Hotline, Plan C Pills, we are always planning for a worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario already exists in states like Texas and Louisiana. So we're absolutely prepared for whatever happens after the election, and we're prepared to continue saying that you can still access abortion pills by mail. Here's the information that you need if you do need to leave the states, your specific state. Information is protected. It is a right. We are allowed to share information. And so we very much built a platform and a project and a strategy that is aligned with, no matter what happens, we are going to share information about how to access abortion safely. And so I think in that way, it's like a little hopeful that there are people that are always going to be doing this work, and you will always be able to access this information. It could be more difficult to get your abortion, but nobody that I know in this movement is going to stop.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. And then I think from like a hope perspective, I was in Texas for 10 years, and I still vote in Texas.
You do?
I haven't been here that long. But you will just find, in places like Texas, Louisiana, and South, you will find the most passionate, you will just find people that care so, so, so much about increasing access and making sure people still get the care that they need. And that will not stop post-election either.
Thank you.
I should have definitely let you go last, because I don't think I'm hopeful, but let me see if I can find a hopeful spin. I mean, I think so. I also helped organize the Gender Liberation March, right? Which is a movement that really connects the fight for gender-affirming care, gender liberation, with reproductive justice. Because the attacks are one and the same, right? Project 2025 is coming after both. And so it's really critically important that we build solidarity intersectionally. I think to a degree that work is actually giving me a lot of hope, right? Because kind of as you're saying, we are thinking and strategizing beyond this, right? I think Project 2025 is a very real threat. If the right wins, it's an incredibly real threat. But also, I think with the Kamala Harris presidency, there's still organizing that we're going to need to do. And there's still, the right is still in the Supreme Court, right? So, I think no matter who wins, I think we will have to continue this fight, which.
So, but you have your QR codes on your seats, or seats next to you. If you have a question that you might not feel super comfortable standing up and asking, that's what that's for. So please enter your questions if that feels comfortable to you. Otherwise, I'm going to open it up. And you can feel free to stand and ask your questions. Do we have any burning? Does anybody want to get us started? Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I know about the Texas laws, and I have no doubt that the Attorney General and his forces will be talking about confiscating phones for evidence. You mentioned that once you get on the site, it's secure. Is there any way other than changing your browser to keep, so the person, if they had the machine confiscated technically, that they couldn't see where they, where
Their
the
digital
site-
footprint
yeah,
or-
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought this up because I usually, when I speak to anybody, I always say these two things. Digital privacy, absolutely a concern, and people should do everything that they can to erase as much of their footprint online when they're searching for abortion information when you live in a banned and restricted state. That is true. On Charley, we do have steps to help you erase your digital footprint as much as you can. That said, most people that are criminalized for miscarriages, abortion, prosecuted, whatever, it doesn't happen because of their digital footprint. It happens because someone that they tell in their life. They told a doctor, they told a friend, they told a mom, a stepmom, whatever. And then that person reports them to the police, and then they look up their digital information, confiscate their phones, that kind of thing. So I think while it is important to understand the steps that you can take to be as safe as you can online, most people aren't getting prosecuted because they're just randomly looking through your search history. It's someone that you have told that has now turned you into the police. The majority of cases, that's what's happening, and I always like to share that with people, not because it's fun to share, but because it's critically important when you live in these states to know that you might not be able to trust your nurse, which sucks. Like, that really sucks. But you have to be really careful, and I also think that's why sometimes digital tools can be helpful, because if you don't have anyone to trust, you don't have anywhere to go, and you can go online and access abortion pills or know what your best options are, there's a smaller chance of that happening. But there is, the Digital Defense Fund is a really great resource to use and help you understand the best ways to search for information online and also have that information deleted.
Yeah, no.
I was curious, I saw the study a couple days ago that came out that abortions are increased, including a lot of the banned states, so I just love your explanation as experts.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, we just had a team call walking through and talking about this study as well, but we've seen that since Roe has fell, that continues to happen and that continues to be the case. And so I think while it hasn't fully and completely broken through that you are able to access abortions in no matter the state, there are so many things that are contributing to this. I think one, it's dangerous to be pregnant, especially if you're a Black person. And so a lot of people are not interested in having children. A lot of people are not interested in those risks, especially living in a state like Louisiana or Texas where your doctor won't even see you until you're 12 weeks pregnant. So I think that is one thing. There's changing dynamics with different generations where not having kids is a more attractive option and also starting to be a more respected option for your life.
I was just gonna say Mel's child-free.
Shout out childless cat babies and people. So I think that's part of it. But also there has been a huge push post-Roe to spread the information that, like, I keep joking about this in like media interviews or whatever. That's been a big year for abortion. Like, abortion's having a moment right now. It's a big word. Everybody's talking about abortion. But I think for a lot of bad ways, but in good ways as well, people are learning how to access abortion information in ways that, I mean, in Louisiana, Caitlin was talking about this, the local newspapers used to never say abortion. They wouldn't even say it. And so I think with all of the personal stories that are being shared, the devastating stories, there's also this emergence of access and information that's happening. And so I think that has contributed greatly since Roe.
Historically, too, any country that has banned abortion, this always happens. Typically also because the clinics are closing, so people don't have access to contraception. So it's not just lack of access to abortion, but they also don't have access to any reproductive health care at all, including contraception.
That's such a good ad.
Yeah, so that's another reason. I haven't read the article yet. I did see the Times posted that.
Kevin has a question.
Yeah, Emily.
So I was kind of curious, like when we were previously talking about like censorship and stuff and avoiding that, especially like on places like Facebook. I was curious like what kind of like I guess research is being done into that, because I know I have a background in like Chinese and like Chinese linguistics, and I did a report just last year at Vassar about sort of how like government censorship has sort of generated this online sort of like cat and mouse game where like now pronunciations of similar words, talk about like, you know, the Tiananmen Square massacre and that sort of thing. There's been a lot of like linguistic development just in the past decade because of censorship issues. And so I guess like for a relevant comparison, it would be like referring to abortion as something that sounds like similar, like on the end of the word, like distortion or something like that. And so I was just curious because I think like what tools are at our disposal when fighting this fight that we can get from previous fights that have already been fought, that sort of thing. Sort of like, I guess my main question is like, where do you think that kind of query can go?
Yeah.
I only have one comment, and I'm going to let you answer this. What a cool research study.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, students are so cool. I want to go back to school. And thank you for sharing that. But.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that I'm not familiar with any research I'm sure it's out there, right?
There's
but I think
Repro Uncensored.
Yeah, that's true. Repro Uncensored is sort of a coalition of abortion organizations, both internationally, that are doing a lot of kind of work in sort of the censorship of repro specifically.
And Amnesty International, or is it Amnesty USA? One of the wings of Amnesty just also did a big report earlier this year. And I can share it with you, and you can share with others, specifically on censorship online. I don't know if they partnered with Repro Uncensored, but I'll say there is research, but it's not, I don't think it's super well funded yet. I've only heard of a couple projects, and specifically about censorship in Repro. But what I do know about, I'll share. But I know Amnesty International had a big report that they had been working on for about a year that came up, or that went out, I think, this summer, specifically on the censorship of abortion and tech.
I know there's also been, not specific to repro, because I think sometimes research can take a second to kind of catch up to the landscape, right? So I think that's part of what we're seeing also. But there has been a lot of research with like the Pew Research Institute on specifically election-related censorship that happens online. But like, for example, on Meta and Instagram, like I think it was maybe like, 8 months ago, that they announced that they basically, without saying it this way, but they're like censoring anything that's like deemed political, right?
So if you, on your phone, if you don't know about this, you got to go in there and make sure you toggle that you do want to see political information, because they automatically turned it off for everybody, which feels, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I thought we didn't like communism.
Yeah. Which is kind of wild. So there's a lot that's happening like in the algorithmic spaces where I think research just needs to catch up. There are places that are like looking at it, that have thought about it. There's like research that you can draw comparisons to. And then I will also just say, like, not necessarily research-wise, but like there's a lot of also coalition building that's happening amongst ourselves and amongst each other around like, how do we like hack the algorithm? How do we move beyond it? I think it's also why I'm personally really invested in like also getting offline, right? Or having investing in multiple kind of like media platforms, because especially with like TikTok and Instagram, that's probably the places where it's happening really heavily. But we have a website, a newsletter, we do a lot of in-person events, right? It's like kind of using all of the tools at our disposal. Because it's gonna take a second, I think.
Anna?
Yeah. I have a question about like marketing and accessibility. How do you make yourself known and accessible to people, maybe older people who don't have a lot of experience using digital tools, or just people who, for whatever reason, don't
I'll say, as far as Charley, since it's a chatbot, not much. So like Charley specifically, it has very specific design intention. But again, I think speaking about the ecosystem of abortion access and storytelling, I think that they can augment each other. So Charley didn't launch on its own. We launched in coalition with Plan C Pills. It's a co-created chatbot by Plan C Pills, I Need an A, I Need an Abortion, and M&A Hotline. And so very integral to Charley's mission is being a part of this ecosystem. M&A Hotline, like not everybody wants to chat with a chatbot. So even sometimes I don't want to chat with a chatbot, and I love this bot. But a core part of it is M&A Hotline. If you don't want to chat with someone or be chatting whatever, that will connect you with a real person when you take your abortion pills and can help, or your miscarriage if you're having a miscarriage, and help walk you through that process. Like we know that a chatbot is not helpful to everyone. So how can we really augment the entire ecosystem with something that we're doing, but still, like, we have to be in coalition with everyone and be supportive of these other things. And so I think, and then from a storytelling perspective, yes, we have a lot of these stories that are online and in video form, but it's deeply, deeply important that we are on the ground and really speaking with people. And events like we had last night, we're having one in Louisiana as well. These types of storytelling events legitimately need to have people in the room that aren't necessarily advocates and aren't necessarily pro-abortion or whatever. Like, how do we get in front of them? And that's something that we've even been talking about a lot. Like, how can we need to throw a party at like everyday people. Like I need people that like are going out and partying and whatever to hear these abortion stories. How do I make that happen? And that's a more on the ground, and I think it can be connected digitally. But anything that we do digitally needs to be grounded in other coalition work, and a lot of that is on the ground.
Yeah. And I would just add, I think about it a lot, especially because we are like primarily on TikTok and Instagram, right? Or really Instagram. But it's why I think we're making the same investments in like having a newsletter, having a website, right? Like really having an audience and meeting our audiences where they're at, and in-person events, all of the things. Like that's why I think in addition to the like trying to get around censorship, right? It's also about like really expanding audiences. And being really intentional about that too, because I also think like, and I think about this a lot, but like, especially with feminism and repro, like this fight is not new, right? Okay. And so we need to be as intergenerational as possible because there's so much that can be learned by sitting with Gloria Steinem and being like, girl, like, whatever. Like it's really, really critical that we are really learning from each other. In ways that I think there's just like limitations of doing that online. Every time I talk to an older person and I'm like, yeah, we're feminists and we're on Instagram, they're like, so I don't really, understand. I'm like, well, we also have our website and we have our newsletter, and I think it's like really critically important that every platform we try to be on.
Maybe one more question? Oh, I see 3. How am I? Are you sure?
Yeah, mine is just very brief, but you can take one.
I can also do quick answers.
No, go ahead. Yeah, we'll do quick. Okay, let's do a rapid round. Yes, Christian.
Charley, they have these servers like outside of the U.S. I was just curious if any of those are within countries with their own abortion bans, but it's under the radar because of the watchdog.
The country that ours is in does not currently have an abortion ban, but they have had one in the past. They have had one in the past. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am, did you have a question? No. Okay. Armin?
Yeah, I just sort of kind of question about Charley, but also like for social media of like language and language is a barrier. Like how do we? Because I think you said like Charley's like specific track, which is goal 9. How do we make sure that like for people who English is not their first language, how do we make sure they can seek care and like ask these questions in the language that is, and make sure that they're also seeing care that can support their language that aren't as critical about not getting abortion care, or about sort of the language
That's a great question. Charley is available in English and Spanish right now, and that was based in the core states that we wanted abortion seekers to be able to interact and engage with Charley: Texas, Florida, some of these banned states. There's a high Spanish-speaking language and high English-speaking language. That said, Charley launched only a year ago, and so our first iteration was English and Spanish. If we felt that Charley was making an impact, it's absolutely always been in the plan to expand languages in future iterations of Charley. But yeah, I think it's deeply and critically important to be accessible in all languages. When we were in Florida, there's a very large Haitian-speaking population where we were, and so that was, again, it's kind of all interconnected. We have to do this on the groundwork to figure out what is helpful digitally. And so we've been doing a lot of research on, okay, when we add new languages, which ones should we prioritize, why, and in what areas?
Yeah, I think obviously not quite the same, but for us, everything we do had, one, for accessibility issues, but everything we do always has captions. And there's also ways in platform to be able to enable those captions for you, so that's just like content-wise. But we also always have pretty much everything we do, which I think is different from most platforms, is we always include call to action, right? Any news headline, any content, whatever we share always has some type of call to action. And those always have like global resources, various languages, different organizations to support, etc. So yeah, but again, limits of the algorithm, so there's kind of only so much we can do, but it is a huge piece of our work to at least drive you to the place that you need to go to. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one last question, and it's actually from my students who are here. Yesterday they made a list of questions. They played with Charley a little bit, and I'm just going to ask this for them, and then I think we can wrap it up, and anyone can come up and ask you. So what can we as students do to support the reproductive justice movement?
My first answer is obviously because we just launched Abortion in America, and there's all of this research that legitimately has said that sharing personal stories about abortion bans does make an impact in how people think about abortion, especially people that are on the other side of it. So I have my stepdad's parents are super anti-abortion, like at the clinics with signs. They live in Ohio, super Catholic. I have a lot of Catholic guilt in me still, just for like existing. But I think if you have the capacity to share personal abortion stories, whether it's your own and you're comfortable, whether it's somebody else's through a video on Facebook. I hate to go on Facebook because it's scary over there, but I do have an audience that needs to see these types of videos. So I think a really easy call to action is sharing abortion stories, and like also just like saying abortion sometimes. Like when you're outside, just abortion. Because like people, we need to start saying abortion. It's not a bad word, you know?
Yeah.
We can do that in class sometime.
Yeah.
We'll just go out on the quad.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, I think we talked about sort of like the power of really destigmatizing it is like really, really essential, and that storytelling is really key. And then I think having just kind of come off the heels of this trip to Florida and seeing what activists are really doing on the ground, like there are so many ways to get offline, and I would highly recommend that. There's door knocking, right? Phone banking, like there's really so much that you can do to like really kind of easily get involved. I think one, if I could just maybe leave like a takeaway, like one organization that I think is doing a lot of important digital advocacy around repro is Reproductive Freedom for All, and they have a lot of really accessible kind of formerly NARAL, really like easily accessible ways to kind of get involved in this fight. And also like if you're in the South or like have connections to the South, like do the work. Right, like get involved, learn more. Again, that depends on like how heavily involved in reproductive justice you want to be, but
Or if you ever work in tech or at Google,
yeah.
especially, give me a call because we've got things to discuss. That will be my last thing. Yeah.
You can also volunteer to like walk people to a clinic, right? Like there's so many ways to support and to kind of get involved.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood's just down the street.
Yeah. And you can donate to abortion funds. A lot of people need to receive care by traveling to get an abortion, so that's also an easy way if you have the funds for it. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for